Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 25 of Own the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
And my name is Dan Alika, and I am AutoTrader's road test editor.
And it's April now, which means it's Earth Month.
Cool.
It used to be a day, now it's a whole month. Yeah.
It's because there are so many other days.
It's
right?
true. There's like National
Day,
Donut Day.
Pancake
I want
Day,
a donut month.
Don't forget your belt day. So it was like, why not just move on to the month? Soon it'll be Earth Year.
Yeah. Earth Decade.
Yeah, we're trending in that direction.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You know, world's on fire. We have to do our little part to fix it.
That's why we need a whole month.
I know.
It's because there's so much going on. There's so much wrong that we need a whole month to fix it, or at least tell people what we need to fix.
Well, and so it's a good month for us at Own the Road with AutoTrader because EVs are really just gaining a lot of steam. A lot of people are interested. And so this episode, we're going to play a game where we type into Google, are EVs or do EVs or can EVs? And we're going to see what your most asked questions are.
Should we also do the stupidest questions? Because I'm sure there's a whole bunch of those.
I do want to do an episode where we go through the comment section of Facebook and
it's
YouTube.
It's almost like those, like one of those, mean tweets.
Yes, because we get so many ridiculous comments on there. And because it's like it's a topic that people get really heated about.
It's a lightning rod for ridiculousness is
really
what it is.
is.
We get, some of the comments, and luckily I don't have Facebook and I never have, but Jodi will occasionally message me to be like, how about this outrageous claim? And it's just somebody who's all like hot under the collar about EVs.
But who also clearly doesn't know what they're talking about,
or
right?
didn't watch the video. Remember that one that I did the thing about how like the public infrastructure? And it was like, charging in public, what's next? And it's like, what? This is...
Yeah, so that person basically thought that Dan was complaining that he wanted to charge in public, but behind a closed door, that doesn't make any sense. And we'll do another episode where we go through the comments because it is a really ridiculous situation that we find ourselves in.
But I meant this, like how many, if you do like, I'm sure if you typed in like REVs, somewhere on that like Google autofill, it's going to be like bad for the environment I'm sure there are a lot of those.
Oh, for sure there are. So we're going to try to pick ones that are more relevant today. And we'll do the shady episode another day.
All right, cool.
But yeah, we know that this is where the whole industry is going towards electric vehicles. We know
I also say, sorry to interrupt, but I was just having this conversation in a group chat with some friends of mine about the need to go zero emissions, and the idea. One of my friends said that he was still like holding out for hydrogen, and he's convinced that the industry is going to get there eventually. But I said to him, like, I don't see it happening because it's almost as if the industry picked its way.
We kind of put all our eggs in that EV basket.
The move to hydrogen, if that were the case, if that were going to be the case, should have happened a long time ago, as opposed to like, let's say, in that kind of 5 to 8 year range. Yes, there are a few hydrogen fuel cell vehicles on the market, but they're limited to where they're sold. Like in the States, it's mostly California. In Canada, it's BC and Quebec. So you have the Hyundai Nexo, which is a hydrogen fuel cell crossover.
Toyota has one.
And then Toyota has the Mirai. And those ones are sold because there's no infrastructure. And then the other side of it that I pointed out is that the big reason why is because you can plug a car in. Yes, it'll take an astronomical amount of time, but you could technically plug an electric car into a household out, like a 120 volt household outlet. You can't do that with hydrogen. You need a very specific hydrogen fueling station. You need a specific nozzle. You can't just go, well, I'm going to pump hydrogen at home. You're going to blow up your house.
Yeah, and so it's hydrogen in theory is a very good idea.
I
love it because the only emissions is water. Like when you burn hydrogen, the only thing that comes out of your tailpipe is water, which is really cool.
But
our last episode, we talked about how grumpy we were about public EV charging. Can you imagine how grumpy we would be with the hydrogen fueling infrastructure
No.
because it's even less.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. My point is just that all our eggs are in the EV basket. Of
Exactly.
course, not in the current state. We would drive, let's say you bought a hydrogen car in Ontario, you would be able to drive the 700 kilometers or whatever it can cover on that single tank, and then it would be a brick because there's literally nowhere in this province
No.
to refuel. So it's like what I'm saying is one for one. If we were going to be, a hydrogen focused industry or headed in the direction of hydrogen, that move should have happened 5 to 8 years ago.
Right.
It's too late. I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see it happening. But I also think we're at the very entry point of electrification still. We've talked before about stuff like solid state batteries. We need to reach that point. Right now, the way I look at it is it's still early adoption, even after all these years of proper EVs being on the market. We are in the equivalent of that phase of, let's say, like the 19 teens, right? Where some people, or a lot of people were still using like horse and buggy to get around. And if you had a car, people would surely, kind of poke fun at you and say, why are you wasting your time and effort with that thing?
It's just a trend. It'll go away.
And, because back then they were unreliable, they were janky, they were inefficient, they wouldn't start. There's all those problems. Now we're just seeing the electric version of that, right? Where the infrastructure is terrible. The anxiety is still very real. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why we do episodes like this, because we know that EV life is a very new thing for a lot of Canadian drivers. So understandably, a lot of you have questions. There's a lot of confusion around it. And so we're here to try to demystify EVs for you and kind of alleviate that confusion. Because it's really not as scary as you might have heard. There's a lot of misinformation out there. But let's get started. We have a lot of questions to go through.
Okay.
So the first one that popped up in Google, and I think this is very relevant to us as Canadian drivers, are EVs good in the snow?
Yes.
But
the kind of short answer is yes, especially all-wheel drive. So dual or tri or quad motor EVs that have all-wheel drive are going to be very good because there's just a lot of traction and you don't have to wait for that mechanical buildup because it's electric. I always say it's like a dimmer switch. So you're just adjusting how much torque you want to send to the wheels. The weight can be a pro and a con. Electric vehicles way more than their gas-powered counterparts because batteries and electric motors are heavy. So that means in deep snow, yeah, it could become a problem.
right.
But then the flip side of it, there's a lot of situations. It's the same reason why, so many people out there still to this day put bags of sand or kitty litter in the beds of their trucks during the wintertime. It's to get more weight over the drive wheels so that on ice or on snow, you'll be able to get that traction down. So EVs actually have that in their favor, that all the weight of the electrical components actually allows them to get the traction down.
And the other thing I wanted to point out is that, yes, they are good in snow, but the thing that'll make a bigger difference for you as a Canadian driver is having proper winter tires.
Oh, yeah.
Even if an EV has all-wheel drive, we still recommend that you have dedicated winter tires because that is what will give you more grip.
There's nowhere, I've said this before and I'll say it again, even in, and not this year, this past winter notwithstanding, where Vancouver got hammered with snowstorms, even in a place like Vancouver with a pretty temperate climate, like you should still have winter tires because it's not just about driving in snow, it's about driving in ice, it's about driving just in cold weather, right? Traditional all season and summer tires the rubber compound gets very hard. Rubber is supposed to be soft and grippy. You don't have that when the temperature drops. So below, kind of the rule of thumb is below an average ambient temperature of 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, you should have dedicated winter tires. And yeah, there's just nowhere in Canada that you shouldn't be running them from, let's say, November 1st to on or about the end of March.
Okay, and so this leads into our next question, which is, do EVs need special tires?
No.
And you really?
Yeah, no.
So what I've heard is that EVs are heavier, so they need tires that can withstand that extra weight. But they also use low rolling resistance tires
they
to
don't-
help their fuel efficiency.
Yes, but that's a choice, not a need.
Right, okay.
Right? Low rolling resistance, yes, it is more efficient. Tire companies make low rolling resistance tires specific for electric vehicles, but they are not a necessity. And that, I think, is a big, and
Cool.
prime examples are, I don't know, the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT Performance Edition, right? That runs performance tires. The same thing with like the GMC Hummer EVs. Those run crazy off-road tires that you would find on, an off-road pickup truck or something like a Ford Bronco. So it's not a need. It's wise, but it's not an absolute, like, you don't, if you went to a tire shop because you had a blown out tire and they didn't have one of those low rolling resistance tires, it's not like you'd be like, oh no, I'm in big trouble now. You could still put on a regular tire. It's just you
Perfect.
might notice a little bit less efficiency overall, but even then, I think it's pretty moderate overall, the difference you'll see.
Okay, cool. Good answer. Do EVs work in the cold?
Yes.
Yes, but there's always a lot of these questions will be yes, but.
Yeah, caveats galore. This is a prime example. This week, I'm driving the Kia Niro EV, which is redesigned for 2023. I drove the previous gen just last winter. It was at the start of winter, and now this one I've been driving it at the end of winter. So last year, it was good. I liked it a lot, and it didn't lose. It was only rated for 385 kilometers, but I saw very minimal range loss. This week, when I picked it up on a full charge, and this thing has like 5,000 kilometers on it, this tester, so it's well beyond kind of the break-in period. When I picked it up, it only had 303 kilometers, and it's supposed to have 407. So that's a good 25%, which Jodi and I have said in the past. People that have asked us questions about range loss and saying they've seen 40 to 50%. I've never seen that high. The kind of 20 to 30% is pretty normal. That's what I'm seeing in this Niro EV. To me, it's very disappointing because that's more than I'd like to see. And realistically, it is that great, debate, right? About, well, how much do you actually drive? And, your commute to work. And that's what we reference and other people always reference. Well, your commute's only 25 or 50 kilometers. That's fair. But we all drive out of, you love going like antique shopping. You drive out of town kind of spontaneously.
All the time.
And to have to add on that time, when I did my evaluation drive, when I picked this Niro up, I was like, I want to kind of see how far I can go. So I was heading up towards Collingwood, and the range anxiety was out of control. Now, it was very accurate. When I finished my drive, I did 249 kilometers, and I had 54 kilometers of range remaining. So that's exactly 303, which is what it told me I would have when I left. So I was really impressed because some vehicles you see drastic range loss, like real-time range loss. But that still doesn't change the fact, and I've referenced this before, last year KPMG did that study. 79% of Canadians said they wouldn't consider an EV unless it could travel 400 kilometers or more on a single charge. That is totally reasonable to me. So only being able to do 303
It's a big disappointment for me.
It's huge, and it would not work for my life.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, that's kind of sad that it can only do 300 kilometers.
It's not just, I had the same problem with the Bolt EV. I had the same problem with the Mercedes EQB SUV. It's less of a problem when you drive a vehicle with a bigger battery pack, of course. But the question comes down to, gas-powered vehicles are less efficient in the wintertime. But I've never driven a gas-powered vehicle that has been 25 or 30% less efficient than it is in the summertime.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
And that also comes back to what you said earlier about solid state batteries, because when we hit that point where that becomes the norm in EVs, solid state batteries are a lot less volatile. And they worked regardless of what the weather conditions are.
Exactly.
So I think that will help address a lot of the issues we have now with EVs.
Because solid state, it's like a glass or a ceramic, that's the chemistry. With lithium ion and lithium polymer batteries, quite simply, like, the electrons just don't move as quickly in the wintertime. It's like anything, right? It just kind of, you know, that physical turn, it kind of gets gummed up. It's the same thing with, like, I don't know, engine oil, right? You run thinner oil in the wintertime because it's not going to get kind of gummed up and slow down the way that your engine should be operating. Electrons work the same way, but it still is a big problem with EVs, especially if you don't have home charging. Jodi and I both live in buildings and we can't hook up at home. So we rely on public infrastructure. And then that is last week's episode. And go listen to our angry rants about that.
It's true. It's a good episode. Yeah, so moving on. Are EVs reliable? That's an interesting question because typically when Dan and I are testing EVs, we only have them for a week. So we can't really comment about reliability. But EVs do have less moving parts, which technically means there should be less to go wrong. But the other issue is that they also run a lot of software. And I think when we talk about reliability and EVs, it's how reliable is that software. And we've all experienced, you know, glitches on our phones and on our laptops. And I think it's reasonable to expect that to happen to a certain extent in EVs as well.
Totally, yeah. And the other thing is, right, again, like we mentioned earlier, the life of EVs, they're still very young, so we haven't seen a lot. Like, yes, you know, you do have these older, like, Nissan Leafs and early Teslas and that sort of stuff, but the reliability is still not. When you look at a gas-powered vehicle, again, you know, we have this massive, you know, body of evidence of how long they should last. Brands that have been doing it, you kind of, those reputations, like Toyota has a great reputation for reliability because over the course of the last, you know, 50 or 60 years, it's just a proven track record of reliability. Whereas EVs, there aren't 50 or 60 years worth of EVs, at least, you know, kind of mass produced EVs to say, oh yes, brand A builds really reliable electric vehicles. But to Jodi's point, less moving parts. Regenerative braking means you're not going to use the mechanical brakes, which actually has a kind of the opposite effect, that if you don't use your mechanical brakes enough, you are going to have to service or replace them from lack of use, right? So that's one of those things where when you have regenerative, just like people, like EV owners will always tell you, oh, don't charge to 100% all the time because of battery degradation. Don't use the highest charging speeds because of battery degradation. The same applies to the braking system, the mechanical brakes. Use them. Don't solely, I don't know, let's say you're driving to work, use the regen brakes until the last few kilometers and then switch over to the mechanical brakes just to exercise them, kind of get that coating off, that rust that builds up over time. You don't want any of those parts to seize. So that's kind of my advice.
That's a good tip. This is a good question, and there's a couple different ways we can tackle this. So are EVs cheaper than gas? And so this is a question we get asked a lot, and this is something that people argue about a lot in the comment section. So if we take an EV and a gas-powered counterpart, like let's use the Hyundai Kona as an example because it's one of the rare ones where you can get it as an EV or a pure internal combustion, right?
Yeah.
So the EV version will be more expensive outright than the gas-powered version.
Yeah.
However, when you look at per kilometer driven, the EV is way cheaper to run, and so you end up saving a lot of money. So
especially if you charge at home. That's
especially so, yeah. So because electricity is right now is going to be, it's cheaper than gas, and so don't look at it like, oh, it's going to take me X amount of years of driving an EV to get my value out of it. Like, don't look at it like that because it won't make sense that way. And that's not the way you should look at a car anyway, because cars will always depreciate in value.
Yes.
So it doesn't really make sense to think about it like that. But looking at the Hyundai Kona, to drive 100 kilometers in a gas one, the average is about $10.94. Just based on average gas prices, right? If you charge at home and you drive 100 kilometers in a Hyundai Kona EV, according to national average electricity prices, you're paying $2.44 per 100 kilometers. And let's say you drive 20,000 kilometers in a year. In the Kona gas-powered one, you're going to end up spending about $2,100 in gas. In the EV, and if you can charge at home, you're only spending about $488.
Okay.
So in a year, that's a savings of $1,700.
Yeah, it's significant. And then even when you factor in, so the other day in this Nero, I stopped at an Electrify Canada station and I hooked up to a 150 kilowatt, which technically you can do up to 350 in the new Nero EV, but the gains are very marginal compared to doing 100 kilowatts. It's literally like, I think it's something like 43 minutes to charge from 10 to 80% on a 350 kilowatt charger and 46 minutes on a 100 kilowatt. But I had to take the 150 because the other stations were occupied. But anyways, that was expensive. Like it was something like $56 and I was shocked.
Wow.
I went from, I want to say it was 18 to 99%, cost like $56. And I was shocked. But even gas prices today, you would spend more than $56 to get the equivalent of going from, call it a fifth of a tank to a full tank in a Nero. And yes, you might get a little bit more mileage out of that because in the wintertime, this thing, like I mentioned, has been struggling with range. But even so, that is reasonable for what you're getting. And if you're only doing it on the occasion that, I don't know, you're road tripping it out to Windsor or something like that, and you need to stop once or twice.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's the cost of driving.
Yeah. So even if you're using public charging, it's still going to be cheaper.
And then factor in what we just talked about with, the fact that you don't need to do oil changes. Routine maintenance is less frequent than it is in a gas-powered vehicle.
Yep. So you have savings on top of other savings.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, stop looking at it like it's going to take me X amount of years because that just doesn't make sense.
And also, be real with yourself. Would you, gas or electric, are you planning to keep any vehicle for that long to see that, to realize that return of it's costing me this much? The average Canadian isn't keeping a car for 10 or 12 or 15 years
true.
Anyways.
Yeah.
We nowadays we go through, there's a reason why we sell, we went from not that long ago, like less than a decade ago, I think we just broke 1 million new vehicle sales in Canada. And then the pandemic obviously affected things with the supply issues, but it was like shortly thereafter that we reached the 2 million mark. We like to buy new vehicles. How many people do you know that go through it every 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, they just lease them and keep going.
So it's, so you don't, trying to justify your purchase or not purchasing an EV because of this weird, you want to hit this perfect mark of my return is finally paying off. That's not how any vehicle works these days.
No, because they will always depreciate. That's just how cars work.
Yeah.
But there was a funny comment on, I think it was on Facebook, and it was about an EV article that we wrote on AutoTrader. And they were like, oh, just wait until the communist government turns off the electricity and you can't go anywhere.
Yeah,
where does that come from?
The mindset is so bizarre, the anti-EV, movement, if you want to call it that, is just like anything. I mean, there's really no reasoning with these people. They've made their minds up. But let's be real. So the conspiracy here is that the government is going to, wean us off of gas and diesel. Wait until we all drive electric vehicles and then shut the electricity off. So first of all, that means no power anywhere. And second of all, what would the economy do? It would instantly tank.
And how would they benefit from that, right?
It's nonsense, right? It's stupid people saying stupid things.
We should do a whole episode on EV conspiracy theories.
Oh
I think that would
God.
be really fun.
I'll have to wear my tinfoil hat.
But we'll demystify all of them. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So we only have time for a couple more questions.
Okay.
This one's really funny, but I actually think there's a good answer for it. Why are EVs so ugly?
Coefficient of drag.
Yep, it comes down to aerodynamics. And so
Yeah.
if you look at the new Hyundai Ioniq 6, it's a really good example. It looks like a bar of soap.
Yuck.
And it's because it just slides through the air a lot more efficiently. And because of that, it will allow you to drive further on a single charge.
Yeah, it's like that one is I want to say, I don't remember the exact numbers because there's a difference in Europe and in Korea. You can buy it with camera door mirrors as opposed to proper ones, whereas in Canada and the US, you still have to have door mirrors. So I want to say it's something like 0.21 or 0.22 coefficient of drag. It's one of the lowest, so essentially the most slippery cars in Canada. If you look at this new Nero, it has these little tiny vents just behind the rear doors, and that kind of creates this air curtain where the air, channels through these little slits behind the doors and out behind the tail lights, and it creates this really narrow slipstream behind the vehicle. So the coefficient of drag in this Nero, which is very kind of boxy and upright, is only 0.29.
That's great.
Which is very important because that's how, just like a gas-powered vehicle, if you take a look at something like, I don't know, a Toyota Corolla is obviously going to slip through the air, a little more smoothly than a Ford F-150, right? But these little tricks are what engineers and designers are trying to do to maximize the efficiency and aerodynamics of EVs.
Yeah, and
but that's
so
why they're ugly.
I think that sometimes maybe when you're looking at an EV, because we're not used to it not needing certain features, like for example, they don't need a grille where air can pass through. So I think a lot of them just look different and they're not necessarily ugly. We just have to get used to them. But some of them
they're
are ugly.
Yeah, there's lots of ugly ones out there.
And then one more is, why are EVs so expensive? And really
Technology.
The reason is because batteries are expensive.
Yeah. Batteries and electric motors. You got to think about the democratization of, internal combustion technology. First of all, rarely, yes, certain technology in a gas engine is proprietary, right? So it's like each brand or each automaker or supplier is going to have a proprietary direct injection method, that sort of stuff. They patent certain things, but they're all open patents, right? Whether you're looking at like the Atkinson cycle engine or a diesel engine, those are all, anyone can build those engines. Whereas electric motors, they're proprietary. They're still, protected by, trademarks and all that kind of stuff. Or not trademarks, whatever you, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Where it's, it's somebody's invention. Patent, that's what I was looking for. They're patented technologies, and you have to buy the rights to use those electric motors. Same thing with batteries. Panasonic is a big battery supplier. LG Chem is a big battery supplier. But those are patented battery technologies that cost a lot of money. As EVs expand in the marketplace and more people buy them, the cost is going to come down, just like gas-powered cars 100 years ago. Yeah,
and it's just, it hasn't hit that economies of scale thing yet. Like, EVs are still a very small portion of what an automaker will sell every year.
Yeah.
And so until that tipping point, the prices are still going to be pretty high, but they should only get better with time.
Yeah.
As the technology gets cheaper, as the automakers get more experience with mass manufacturing them, the prices should come down.
And, Nissan is a brand that's really pushing towards solid state batteries and said the cost will come down significantly once we hit that technology. And that's why I said earlier, this is still early adoption phase. This is still, a lot of guinea pigs where it's kind of trial and error right now. Still, to this point, EVs are still in that trial and error phase.
Got it. So today's Ask an Expert question comes from Maroon, who's a loyal listener who has sent in questions before. So thank you so much for your support. Hi, I love the podcast, and I'm always looking forward to the next one. Since Tesla reduced their price on the Model 3, I decided to purchase it, and I'm expecting to receive it on the 22nd of March. So by this time, you should already have it.
Totally.
So congrats on your new car. As you know, you can drive an EV with either one pedal or two. My question is the following. Does driving with two pedals create the same regenerative braking as driving with one pedal? Thanks for taking my question.
It does not. First of all, like Jodi said, congrats on the new car. I hope you're kind of making that adjustment. I hope you're realizing those savings that we just talked about. And people like you are really what we need to kind of be champions of electrification and show your friends and neighbors and coworkers that the transition is easy and necessary. The simple answer is no, right? So using the brake pedal in an electric vehicle engages the mechanical brakes, whereas regenerative braking, so the one pedal driving that you talked about, that is using the electric motors to spin in reverse and harvest kinetic energy that would otherwise be lost and put that into the battery pack. So you really do want to use one pedal driving as often as possible in your EV to maximize range, to maximize efficiency. But like I said earlier, every once in a while, it doesn't have to be a daily thing, but every once in a while, make sure to engage those mechanical brakes just to work them out a little bit and make sure that they don't seize up on you. You're not going to see it quickly. It's not like it's going to happen within a month or whatever, but realistically, the average Canadian, you're only servicing your brakes once every couple of years, whereas in an EV, it can accelerate that timeline very quickly.
Yep.
Unless you're using them here and there just to kind of get the rust off.
Great question, though, Maroon. If you have any more questions about your new life with your Tesla Model 3, please let us know. We already know where to reach us. And we have another question from Steven. I just watched your podcast regarding premium versus regular fuel.
Yep.
I recently purchased a used 2020 Civic Sport Touring.
Yep.
I did some research online and found that it takes regular fuel. When I went to fill up for the first time, I was surprised to see premium recommended 87 minimum on the fuel door. I've been putting in 91, but after watching your podcast, I'm wondering if I need to. Thanks again for your thoughts. Yeah.
No. And I mean, I don't mean that. Do what you feel is right. But if it's saying, premium recommended and not premium required, then definitely go with the regular grade gas. Save yourself whatever Jodi talked about last time. It was like $16 a tank. That's significant. So I would, if I were driving that car, I would be putting 87 octane in the tank. No judgment if you want to keep doing 91. Just I wouldn't personally do it, and it's not required, so you can comfortably skip it.
It's not really going to affect your performance very much. It'll save you some more money if you use regular fuel.
Especially not in something like a Civic.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about it. You can go back to that episode that you referenced. Certain vehicles will perform differently on a higher grade gas, but the Civic is not going to be one of those cars.
Thanks for your question, Stephen. If any of you have questions you would like to ask Dan or I, you could email expert@trader.ca. And yeah, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Drive safe, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.